I hit publish on that review at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, and by Wednesday morning, my entire life had exploded. Ever trusted your gut so completely that you'd bet your career on it? Well, I did. And let me tell you, sometimes your gut is right, but the world ain't ready to hear it. My name's Emma, I'm 38, and I've been food critic for the LA Weekly for 7 years. Before that, I waited tables at every dive from Echo Park to Santa Monica, worked my way through culinary school one burnt omelet at a time. I know food. I know restaurants. And I know when someone's trying to pull a fast one. But I had no idea what I was walking into that night at Luminous. You've probably seen the headlines by now. Food Critic's viral review destroys trendy restaurant. The review that broke the internet. When food critics go too far. Yeah, that was me. The woman who supposedly ruined a family business with 847 words and a 2-star rating. Except that's not the whole story. The real story? It starts 3 weeks earlier with a phone call that should have been my first red flag. Emma Caldwell? This is Marcus Murphy from Luminous. We'd love to host you for dinner this Friday. His voice was smooth, confident. Too confident. I know you don't typically take reservations from restaurants directly, but we're opening next week and, well, we think you'll want to see what we're doing. Most restaurants don't call critics. They know we prefer to dine anonymously, pay our own way, blend into the crowd. But Marcus Murphy, something about his tone made me curious. Maybe it was the slight challenge in his voice, like he was daring me to say no. What makes Luminous so special? I asked, pen hovering over my calendar. We're revolutionizing farm-to-table dining in LA, hyper-local ingredients, zero-waste kitchen, dishes that tell the story of California itself. He paused, and I could practically hear him smiling. Plus, our head chef just won James Beard Rising Star. Surely that's worth your Tuesday night. First lie. I should have caught it. See, I'd done my homework on Luminous before that call. Their head chef, Sophia Martinez, was talented, sure, but she hadn't won any James Beard awards. Not yet, anyway. But Marcus delivered that line with such conviction, I almost believed him. Almost. Friday works, I said. But I pay my own way, no special treatment, and I choose my own table. Of course. We wouldn't dream of compromising your integrity. Second lie. Way bigger than the first. Friday night rolled around, and Luminous looked like every other trendy LA hotspot that had popped up in the past 5 years. Exposed brick, Edison bulb chandeliers, reclaimed wood tables that probably cost more than my car. The hostess, a 20-something with perfectly tousled beach waves, seated me at table 12, right in the center of the dining room. Weird. I'd specifically requested something inconspicuous. But the real red flags started flying when I opened the menu. Heirloom tomatoes from our partner farm in Oxnard. Line-caught Pacific rockfish, delivered daily. Grass-fed Wagyu from our exclusive ranch in Paso Robles. Sounded impressive. Sounded authentic. Sounded like the kind of farm-to-table paradise that food magazines drool over. Sounded like complete garbage. I've been writing about LA's food scene for 7 years. I know every legitimate farm-to-table supplier within 200 miles. I know which restaurants actually source locally and which ones just slap farm fresh on their Cisco deliveries. And something about Luminous menu made my journalist instincts tingle. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you about the meal first. The amuse-bouche arrived 15 minutes after I'd ordered 3 tiny spoonfuls of what the server called deconstructed gazpacho with microgreens from our rooftop garden. It tasted like V8 juice with grass clippings. Not a promising start. The appetizer, wild mushroom risotto with truffle oil, came next. Now I've had real truffle risotto. I've eaten at Le Bernardin, at French Laundry, at places where they shave actual truffles tableside. This was button mushrooms swimming in artificial truffle oil so strong it made my eyes water. The rice was overcooked, gummy, like something you'd find at a mall food court. But here's where it gets interesting. As I'm choking down this disaster of a risotto, I notice the couple at the table next to me taking photos. Not unusual in LA, except they weren't taking food photos. They were taking photos of me. Subtle ones, phones hidden behind wine glasses, but definitely photos. My skin started crawling. Professional paranoia or a legitimate threat? In my line of work, you learn to trust those instincts. The entree arrived, and any doubt about Luminous being a scam evaporated. Line-caught Pacific rockfish with seasonal vegetables. The fish was clearly frozen, probably sitting in a Costco freezer for months before landing on my plate. The vegetables? Carrots and broccoli that tasted like they'd been steamed to death hours ago, then reheated in a microwave. But the worst part? The fish was served on a plate with a small card that read, "Caught this morning by Captain Rodriguez, off the Malibu coast." I almost laughed out loud. See, I'd been down to the Santa Monica Pier that very morning, coffee in hand, watching the fishing boats come in. It was rough weather, had been all week. No commercial boats had gone out in 3 days. Captain Rodriguez, whoever he was, hadn't caught this fish this morning. Hell, he probably hadn't caught it this month. That's when I knew. Luminous wasn't just serving bad food, they were lying about everything. The sourcing, the suppliers, probably even their chef's credentials. This wasn't farm to table, it was fraud to table. And they'd invited me personally to witness it. I finished my meal, paid my check, and drove home with my head spinning. Why would a restaurant invite a food critic to experience their lies firsthand? It didn't make sense. Unless they thought they could fool me. Unless they were so confident in their performance that they believed their own hype. Or unless they had a plan. I spent the weekend researching. Called contacts at farms in Oxnard, checked with fishing operations in Malibu, even drove out to Paso Robles to verify their supposed Wagyu supplier. Every single claim on their menu was bogus. The partner farm didn't exist. The exclusive ranch had never heard of them. The line-caught fish came from a wholesale distributor in Vernon. Luminous wasn't just serving mediocre food, they were running a full-scale deception. So, I wrote the review. Honest, direct, factual. I detailed every lie, every fake claim, every corner they'd cut. I gave them 2 stars instead of 1 because the service was decent and the space was pretty. But I made it clear, Luminous was selling a fantasy that didn't exist. Luminous promises a farm-to-table experience that celebrates California's bounty, I wrote. What it delivers is cafeteria-quality food wrapped in agricultural fiction. The heirloom tomatoes from Oxnard taste suspiciously like grocery store beefsteaks. The line-caught rockfish bears all the hallmarks of frozen fish that's seen better days. And the grass-fed Wagyu? Well, let's just say the cows in Paso Robles have never met Marcus Murphy. I ended with this. Luminous isn't just overpriced, it's dishonest. In a city full of restaurants doing farm-to-table right, why settle for farm-to-fable? Farm-to-fable. I was pretty proud of that line. I submitted the review Monday afternoon. It went live Tuesday at midnight. By 6 a.m. Wednesday, my phone was buzzing like an angry hornet. The first text was from my editor, Sarah. Jesus, Emma. Your Luminous review is everywhere. Twitter's going insane. Then my best friend Jess. Girl, you just broke the internet. Hashtag farm-to-fable is trending. Then numbers I didn't recognize. You destroyed that restaurant, you evil witch. Hope you're proud of yourself. Food critics are parasites. Wait, what? I opened Twitter, and my heart sank into my stomach. The review had gone viral, but not the way I'd expected. Someone had taken screenshots of the harshest parts, stripped away all context, and turned it into a hashtag mob. Hashtag Luminous deserves better was trending. Hashtag Food Critics Bully was gaining steam. And somehow, I'd become the villain. But the worst part? The screenshots weren't just random. They were strategic, professional, coordinated. Someone had weaponized my review. My phone rang. Marcus Murphy. Emma, his voice was ice cold now. Congratulations. You just put 47 people out of work. Marcus, I wrote an honest review about. You wrote a hit piece. A calculated assassination of a family business. His voice was rising. Sophia's been crying all morning. Our servers are getting calls from their other jobs, asking if they're the ones from that restaurant. You didn't just review our food, Emma. You declared war. Declared war. That phrase stuck with me. because that's exactly what it felt like. I reviewed what you served me, I said. If you have a problem with my facts, your facts. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Let me tell you some facts, Emma. You ordered the most expensive items on our menu. You sat in the center of the restaurant, disrupting other diners with your note-taking. And then you wrote a review designed to destroy us. I ordered what looked interesting. I sat where your hostess put me, and I wrote what I experienced. What you experienced, he repeated.
Right.
Well, let me give you a new experience. The line went dead. That should have been my cue to call the police. Instead, I spent the day watching my professional reputation crumble in real time. The backlash was swift, organized, and brutal. Food bloggers who'd never heard of me were writing think pieces about criticulture and the cruelty of food reviews. Restaurant industry accounts were retweeting my photo with captions like, "This is what destroying dreams looks like." But here's the thing that really twisted my gut. Some of it was working. I was starting to doubt myself. Had I been too harsh? Was farm to fable clever or cruel? Were those servers really going to lose their jobs because of my words? Self-doubt is a critic's worst enemy. Once it creeps in, you're done. My editor called that afternoon. Emma, we need to talk. Sarah's office overlooked downtown LA, all glass and steel and nervous energy. She'd been my champion for 7 years, defended my toughest reviews, backed me up when restaurants complained. But when I walked in that Wednesday, she looked scared. The phone hasn't stopped ringing, she said. Advertisers, PR firms, other restaurants. Everyone wants to know if this is our new editorial direction. What's that supposed to mean? It means people are wondering if we're in the business of destroying restaurants now. I sat down hard. Sarah, you read my review before it went live. You know I documented every false claim. I know what you wrote, but I also know what people are reading. She pulled up her laptop, clicked through to Twitter. Look at this. Screenshot after screenshot of my review, but edited. Sentences taken out of context, arranged to make me look vindictive and cruel. The food was garbage without the context of why. This place is a joke, without the explanation of their false advertising. Someone's editing my work, I said. This isn't what I wrote. I know, but it's what people are seeing. Sarah closed her laptop. Emma, I need you to consider writing a follow-up. Something that clarifies your position. Maybe softens the tone. Softens the tone. Every critic's nightmare. The moment when truth becomes secondary to keeping the peace. You want me to apologize for being honest? I want you to apologize for the perception of being cruel. She sighed. Look, I believe your review was fair. But perception is reality in this business, and right now, the perception is that Emma Caldwell is a bully. I walked out of that meeting feeling like the ground had shifted beneath my feet. 7 years of building credibility, of earning respect, of proving that I could be tough but fair, and it was all crumbling because of one honest review. Or was it? That night, I couldn't sleep. Something about the whole situation felt orchestrated, too clean, too coordinated. So I did what any good journalist does when something smells fishy. I started digging. First, I traced the viral spread of my review. It hadn't gone viral organically. The first shares came from accounts with thousands of followers but very little engagement, classic signs of bot influence. Someone had paid to amplify the backlash. Second, I looked at the edited screenshots. They weren't random crops by angry readers. They were professionally designed, with consistent fonts and layouts. Someone with graphic design skills had weaponized my words. Third, I checked Marcus Murphy's background. Luminous wasn't his first restaurant. He'd opened 3 others in the past 5 years, all with similar concepts, all in trendy neighborhoods. And all 3 had closed within 18 months, leaving behind upset investors and unpaid bills. Pattern recognition. Another journalist's best friend. But the real breakthrough came when I found Marcus's LinkedIn. His previous job? Digital marketing consultant specializing in reputation management and crisis communications. Bingo. This wasn't a chef defending his restaurant. This was a marketing expert executing a campaign. The question was, why target me? I spent Thursday diving deeper into Marcus Murphy's history. Turns out, reputation management was a nice way of saying professional spin doctor. His client list included politicians caught in scandals, companies facing lawsuits, and restaurants trying to bury bad reviews. But Luminous was different. Instead of trying to bury my review, he'd amplified it, turned it into a weapon against me.
Why?
Because he knew the restaurant was doomed anyway. See, here's what I discovered. Luminous was built on investor money, promises of revolutionizing LA dining, projections of massive profits. But the food costs were unsustainable, the fake sourcing claims were legally questionable, and the whole operation was hemorrhaging cash. Marcus needed an exit strategy. And what better way to close a failing restaurant than to blame a vicious food critic for destroying an innocent family business? My review wasn't his problem, it was his solution. That's when I got angry. Really properly angry. Nobody uses my words as a prop in their con game. Nobody turns my honest work into their marketing strategy. And nobody, absolutely nobody, destroys my reputation to cover their own tracks. Time to fight back. Friday morning, I started making calls. Restaurant suppliers, former employees, investors. One by one, I pieced together the real story of Luminous. The farm in Oxnard, address led to a strip mall parking lot. The exclusive ranch in Paso Robles had never heard of Marcus Murphy. The James Beard winner chef? Sofia Martinez was talented, but she'd been hired just 2 weeks before opening, barely had time to learn the menu, let alone design it. But the smoking gun came from Danny, a line cook who'd quit after 3 days. Dude was insane. Danny told me over coffee in Los Feliz. First day, he shows me these fancy menus talking about local farms and sustainable sourcing. Then, he takes me to the walk-in cooler, and it's all Cisco boxes and frozen fish. I'm like, where's the local stuff? And he goes, the local stuff is the story we tell customers. The Cisco stuff is what keeps us profitable. Danny had photos, box labels, delivery receipts, invoices. Everything that proved Luminous was buying the cheapest ingredients possible while charging premium farm-to-table prices. Why didn't you report this earlier? I asked. Who was going to believe a line cook over a smooth-talking owner? Danny shrugged. Besides, jobs are hard to find. I kept my mouth shut and found work somewhere else. But now someone was listening. I spent the weekend building my case. Not just about the food, but about the whole operation. The fake sourcing, the misleading investors, the plan to blame critics when the business model collapsed. And then Marcus made his biggest mistake. Sunday night, my doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and saw a young guy in a baseball cap, holding an envelope. Emma Caldwell, he asked when I opened the door. Yeah, this is for you. He handed me the envelope and walked away quickly, like he didn't want to be seen. Inside was a single sheet of paper with my home address, my car's license plate number, and a photo of me taken outside my apartment building. At the bottom, in block letters, stop writing or we'll stop you. That's when I called the police. Officer Martinez was sympathetic but realistic. Unless they make a specific threat or physically harm you, there's not much we can do. But file a report, document everything, and call us if it escalates. Escalates.
Right.
I called Sarah, told her about the envelope. For the first time since this whole mess started, she sounded like my old editor again. Emma, this changes everything. If they're threatening you personally, we're not backing down. Write your follow-up piece. Tell the whole story. But I had a better idea. Instead of writing another review, I did something I'd never done before. I arranged a public confrontation. Monday morning, I called Marcus directly. We need to meet, I said. Face to face. Emma, I think we've said everything. Have we? Because I've got some interesting information about your sourcing practices, your investor projections, and your background in reputation management. I let that sink in. Coffee shop on Melrose, 2 p.m. Come alone. The silence stretched like a held breath. Fine, he said finally. But this better not be some kind of ambush. Just two professionals having conversation about food. And fraud.
And threats.
And the truth. The coffee shop was perfect, public enough to feel safe, quiet enough to have a real conversation. I got there early, chose a table in the back corner where I could see the whole room. Marcus arrived exactly on time, looking like he'd stepped out of a men's fashion magazine. Tailored shirt, perfectly groomed beard, expensive watch. The kind of guy who convinced investors to hand over money based on charm alone. He sat down across from me, and for a moment, we just stared at each other. "So," he said finally, "what's this really about?" I pulled out my phone, opened the voice recorder. "This is about the truth. Are you recording this?" "I'm a journalist, Marcus. I record conversations." I slid a folder across the table. "Take a look." Inside were printouts of everything I'd found. Cisco invoices, fake supplier information, financial projections that didn't match reality. His face went pale as he flipped through the pages. "Where did you get this?" "From people who believed in your vision and got betrayed." I leaned forward. "Marcus, your restaurant was failing before I ever walked through the door. My review didn't destroy Luminous, it exposed what was already dead." He was quiet for a long time. Too quiet. "You don't understand the restaurant business," he said finally. "Everyone cuts corners. Everyone tells stories to make their food sound better. That's not fraud. That's marketing. Marketing doesn't involve threatening critics." "I never threatened you." I pulled out the envelope from Sunday night, showed him the photo and the note. "Really?" His face went from pale to gray. "Emma, I swear to you, I didn't send this." And for the first time since this whole thing started, I believed him. Then who did? He ran his hands through his hair, and suddenly he looked less like a polished marketing executive and more like a scared guy in over his head. "There are people, investors who have a lot of money tied up in Luminous. When your review went viral, when the backlash started building, they saw an opportunity to salvage something from the wreckage." "What kind of opportunity?" "Insurance money. Lawsuit settlements. Ways to recoup their investment by blaming the restaurant's failure on external forces instead of internal problems." The puzzle pieces clicked into place. They wanted the restaurant to fail publicly, didn't they? With a clear villain to blame. Marcus nodded miserably. "Your review was supposed to be ignored, maybe generate a little local buzz. But when it went viral, when people started taking sides, suddenly there was a narrative they could exploit. And if I backed down, wrote an apology, softened my position, the narrative falls apart. They needed you to be the villain, Emma. They needed you to stay the villain. That's why the threats escalated when I started digging. Marcus, I need names. I need to know who's behind this." He looked around the coffee shop nervously. "These aren't people you want to cross. They have lawyers, connections, resources. And I have the truth." I turned off the recorder. "Look, your restaurant was built on lies. That's on you. But turning my honest review into a weapon against me? That's on them. Help me stop this, and maybe we can both come out of it with some dignity intact." He stared at his hands for a long time. "There's a meeting tonight," he said quietly. 7 p.m. at the restaurant. "The investors want to discuss next steps in the media campaign against you. I need to be there." "Emma, that's insane. These people are using my name and my work to commit fraud." "I'm going to be there, Marcus. The question is, are you going to help me, or are you going to let them destroy both of us?" Another long silence. "There's a service entrance in the alley," he said finally. "I'll leave it unlocked. But Emma, if this goes wrong, if they figure out you're there, then we'll deal with it." I gathered up my folder. 7 p.m. "Don't let me down." Famous last words, right? That afternoon, I called in every favor I had. My friend Jake, who worked for the LA Times, agreed to be my backup. If I didn't check in by 9 p.m., he'd call the police. Sarah knew where I was going and why. Even my ex-boyfriend Tom, who I hadn't spoken to in 2 years, agreed to sit in his car outside the restaurant as a lookout. When you're about to confront powerful people with evidence of their crimes, you want witnesses. I got to Luminous at 6:45, parked 3 blocks away, and walked through the alley to the service entrance. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The door was unlocked, just like Marcus promised. Inside, the restaurant looked different with the lights dimmed and the chairs stacked on tables. Less trendy hotspot, more crime scene waiting to happen. I found a spot behind the bar where I could see the main dining room, but stay hidden. At exactly 7 p.m., the front door opened. 3 people walked in. Marcus, looking like he was about to throw up. A woman in an expensive suit who screamed, "Lawyer." And a man in his 60s, silver-haired, wearing the kind of watch that costs more than most people's cars. Money.
Power.
Danger. They sat at a table in the center of the room, and I activated the voice recorder on my phone. "So," the silver-haired man said, "where do we stand with our food critic problem?" The lawyer opened a tablet. "The social media campaign is working. Emma Caldwell's credibility is severely damaged. Several restaurants have publicly distanced themselves from her reviews." "But she's still digging," Marcus said. "She called me today. She has invoices, supplier information, she knows about the sourcing lies." The silver-haired man's voice went cold. "Then we escalate." "Richard, the note we sent was meant to be a warning," the lawyer said. "If we do anything more serious." "More serious?" Richard laughed. "Helen, we've already committed fraud on multiple levels. We've manipulated social media, we've threatened a journalist, and we're about to collect insurance money on a deliberately failed business. A little more serious won't change our legal exposure. They were talking about me like I was a pest to be eliminated. What are you suggesting?" Marcus asked. Richard pulled out his phone. "I know people who specialize in making problems disappear. Not permanently," he added quickly, "but effectively. A break-in at her apartment, maybe some damaged property, a clear message that continued investigation would be unwise." That's when I knew I had enough. I stood up from behind the bar, phone in hand, recorder still running. "Actually," I said, "continued investigation just got very wise." The look on their faces priceless. Richard was the first to recover. "Ms. Caldwell, how nice of you to join us." Richard Van Meer, right? Principal investor in Luminous Holdings, LLC. I'd done my homework on him too. Real estate developer, restaurant investor, and apparently aspiring criminal. Helen, the lawyer, was frantically typing on her tablet, probably calculating jail time and legal fees. "Emma," Marcus said quietly, "you shouldn't be here. Actually, this is exactly where I should be." I held up my phone, because now I have all 3 of you discussing fraud, conspiracy, and plans to intimidate a journalist. That's going to make a hell of a follow-up article. Richard's face went from surprise to furious. "You recorded us, without consent. That's illegal in California." "Actually, it's not. I checked with the LA Weekly's legal team that afternoon. California's a 2-party consent state for private conversations. But when you're planning to commit crimes against me personally, I'm considered a party to the conversation." Helen looked up from her tablet. "Richard, we need to go."
Now.
"I don't think so." I moved closer to the table. "See, here's what's going to happen. You're going to call off whatever campaign you're running against me. You're going to stop manipulating social media, stop threatening journalists, and stop using my work as a prop in your insurance fraud." "And if we don't?" Richard asked. "Then tomorrow morning, every major news outlet in LA gets a copy of this recording, along with all the evidence I've gathered about your fake farm-to-table operation and your plans to collect insurance money on a deliberately failed business." The silence in that restaurant was deafening. Marcus spoke first. "Emma's right. This has gone too far." "Marcus," Helen warned. "No, Helen. I opened a restaurant to serve good food, not to be part of some elaborate fraud scheme." He looked at me. "I lied about the sourcing because I was desperate to succeed. But I never signed up for threatening people or breaking into apartments." Richard wasn't done fighting. "You think you've won something here?" he asked me. "You think exposing us will restore your reputation? The damage is already done, Emma. Even if you prove we manipulated social media, people will still remember you as the critic who destroyed a restaurant. And that's when I played my final card. Actually, they'll remember me as the critic who exposed a massive fraud scheme." I smiled. Because that's the story I'm writing. Not a defensive response to criticism, but an investigative piece about how restaurant investors manipulate public opinion to cover their crimes. I pulled out a printed document. This is a statement from Danny Rodriguez, former line cook at Luminous, confirming that the restaurant knowingly served cheap ingredients while claiming farm-to-table sourcing. This is a statement from Maria Santos, former server, confirming that management instructed staff to lie to customers about food origins. Another document. This is financial analysis showing that Luminous was designed to fail, with insurance policies and investor agreements that actually benefit from business closure. Their faces told me everything I needed to know. The story isn't about whether my review was too harsh, I continued. It's about how criminal investors used my honest journalism as cover for insurance fraud. It's about how they threatened and intimidated me when I got too close to the truth. Helen was packing up her tablet. We're leaving. Actually, a new voice said from the front door. Nobody's leaving just yet.
Police.
Beautiful, wonderful police. Turns out, Tom hadn't just been sitting in his car as a lookout. When he saw Richard Van Meer arrive, a man he recognized from some real estate scandal a few years back, he'd called his cousin Miguel, who happened to be an LAPD detective. Miguel had been listening from the kitchen for the past 10 minutes. Sometimes it pays to have friends with badges. The next few hours were a blur of statements, lawyers, and phone calls. Richard and Helen were arrested on charges of conspiracy and intimidation. Marcus cooperated fully, providing evidence about the fake sourcing and the insurance fraud scheme. But the real victory came the next morning when my investigative piece went live. Behind the viral review, How Restaurant Investors Manipulate Public Opinion told the whole story. The fake farm-to-table claims, the social media manipulation, the threats against journalists, the insurance fraud scheme. And this time it went viral for all the right reasons. Within hours, #JournalismMatters was trending. Restaurant industry groups were condemning the manipulation tactics. Other food critics were sharing their own stories of intimidation and pressure. The narrative had flipped completely. Instead of being the bully who destroyed a restaurant, I became the journalist who exposed corruption in the industry. But the best part? The personal messages. Dozens of restaurant workers reached out to thank me for exposing the lies they'd been forced to tell. Food critics shared their own experiences with manipulative owners and fake sourcing claims. Even customers thanked me for helping them understand how to spot authentic farm-to-table restaurants. 3 weeks later, I was back at my desk at LA Weekly, working on a series about truth in restaurant marketing. Sarah had given me free rein to investigate any restaurant I wanted, with full legal backing from the paper. And Marcus? He called me 2 weeks after his arrest. Emma, he said, I wanted to apologize. Not just for the lies about Luminous, but for getting you tangled up in something so dangerous. What are you going to do now? I asked. Honestly, I'm thinking about going back to cooking. Real cooking, with real ingredients from real farms. He paused. Maybe open a small place, nothing fancy. Just good food, honest prices, no marketing gimmicks. If you do, I said, I'd love to review it. Anonymously, paying my own way, no special treatment. He laughed. A real laugh, not a marketing laugh.
Deal.
But Emma, promise me something? What's that? If the food sucks, just say it sucks. Don't let anyone turn your honesty into a weapon again. Promise made. Promise kept. 6 months later, I'm still getting emails from people who read that investigative piece. Restaurant owners thanking me for exposing the bad actors who make the whole industry look corrupt. Journalists asking for advice on how to handle intimidation. Food lovers wanting to know how to find restaurants that actually source locally. But the email that meant the most came from Sofia Martinez, Luminous' former head chef. Emma, she wrote, I know you probably don't remember me, but I was the chef at Luminous when you came in. I wanted you to know that your review, as painful as it was to read, made me realize I was working for people who didn't respect food or customers or truth. I'm now head chef at a small farm-to-table place in Pasadena, and we actually source from the farms we claim to work with. Thank you for holding us accountable, even when it hurt. Even when it hurt. That's the job, isn't it? Food critics don't exist to make restaurants feel good about themselves. We exist to tell readers the truth about their dining experiences. Sometimes that truth is celebration, a review that highlights incredible food and passionate cooking. Sometimes it's warning, a review that helps people avoid wasting money on mediocre meals. And sometimes, just sometimes, it's investigation, a review that uncovers corruption and fraud and forces an entire industry to look at itself more honestly. The viral restaurant review disaster taught me something important. Truth isn't always popular. Honesty isn't always welcome. And integrity will sometimes make you enemies. But in a world full of spin and manipulation and fake farm-to-table claims, someone has to be willing to say when the emperor has no clothes. Even if they try to destroy you for it.
Especially then.
These days, when I walk into a restaurant and see farm-to-table on the menu, I ask more questions. Where exactly is this farm? Can I see the invoices? Who's your supplier contact? Most restaurants are happy to share that information, proud of their relationships with local growers and producers. Those are the places that deserve celebration, support, and honest reviews that highlight their commitment to quality. But the ones who dodge questions, who speak in vague generalities, who get defensive when pressed for details, well, those are the places that need investigation. And I'm just the critic to do it. 6 months ago, I thought my career was over. I thought one viral review had destroyed 7 years of credibility and hard work. I thought I'd become a cautionary tale about the dangers of being too honest, too direct, too willing to call out fraud. Instead, I became something else entirely. I became a journalist who proved that truth matters more than popularity, that integrity matters more than acceptance, and that sometimes the most important stories are the ones that make powerful people angry. The restaurant industry needed that wake-up call. In the months following my investigation, California passed new legislation requiring restaurants to provide documentation for local sourcing claims. The Restaurant Association created guidelines for authentic farm-to-table marketing. 3 other food critics came forward with their own stories of intimidation and manipulation.
Change.
Real, measurable change. But here's what I didn't expect: the personal cost of standing up to fraud. Even after Richard Van Meer was sentenced to 18 months in federal prison for conspiracy and wire fraud, even after the truth came out about Luminous' fake sourcing and insurance scheme, I still get hate mail. Not as much as before, but enough to remind me that some people prefer comfortable lies to uncomfortable truths. Last week, someone left a dead fish on my car with a note. "This is fresher than your reviews." I laughed. After everything I've been through, anonymous fish jokes seem almost quaint. My apartment building installed better security after the threats. I vary my routines, check my surroundings, keep my phone charged and my recorder ready. It's not paranoia when people have actually tried to intimidate you. But I'm not scared anymore. See, here's what Richard Van Meer and his associates didn't understand. They thought threatening a food critic would be easy, that we're just failed writers who couldn't make it in real journalism. They thought I'd crumble under pressure, apologize for being mean to their fake restaurant, and crawl away to write puff pieces about molecular gastronomy. They were wrong, on every count. Food critics are journalists. We investigate, we verify, we hold powerful people accountable. We're trained to spot lies, trained to dig deeper when something doesn't smell right, trained to ask uncomfortable questions until we get honest answers. And when you threaten us for doing our jobs, well, that just proves we were asking the right questions. These days, I get invited to speak at journalism conferences. The Critic Under Fire: When Reviews Become Investigations. That's the title of my standard presentation. I tell the Luminous story, but I also talk about the broader issues: how social media can be weaponized against journalists, how financial pressure can corrupt food coverage, how readers can tell the difference between honest criticism and paid promotion. The questions afterward are always interesting. How do you maintain objectivity when you know a restaurant owner personally? What's the line between tough criticism and cruel destruction? How do you handle pressure from advertisers and investors? These are the questions that matter. These are the conversations that make food journalism better. But the question that haunts me came from a young blogger in San Diego. "Emma, do you ever regret writing that review? Do you ever wish you'd just stayed quiet and let Luminous fail on its own?" I thought about that for a long time. Luminous would have failed eventually. The business model was unsustainable, the food was mediocre, and the lies would have caught up to them. Maybe in 6 months, maybe in a year, but failure was inevitable. If I'd stayed quiet, if I'd written some generic, mixed results review, or just skipped covering them entirely, Richard Van Meer's insurance fraud scheme might have worked. The fake farm-to-table claims might have continued fooling customers. Other restaurants might have adopted similar deceptive practices. And the next critic who told the truth might have faced even worse retaliation. No, I told that young blogger. I don't regret it. Because silence in the face of fraud isn't neutrality, it's complicity. That's the lesson I want people to take from this story. Not that food critics are heroes. Not that every harsh review is justified. Not that restaurants are villains trying to deceive customers. Most restaurants are run by hardworking people trying to serve good food and make a living. Most criticism is fair, constructive, and helpful. Most conflicts between critics and restaurants can be resolved through honest conversation. But when fraud enters the picture, when powerful people try to silence journalists, when truth becomes negotiable, that's when we have to fight. The luminous investigation changed how I approach restaurant reviews. I ask harder questions, verify more claims, and dig deeper when something seems off. I've exposed 2 more fake farm-to-table operations, uncovered a wine fraud scheme, and helped shut down a restaurant that was serving expired seafood. I've also celebrated more authentic places than ever before. Because when you know what real farm-to-table looks like, when you've met the farmers and suppliers and producers, when you understand the actual cost and effort of sourcing locally, you appreciate restaurants that do it right. Places like Verde in Silver Lake, where Chef Maria actually drives to the farmers market every Tuesday morning, and you can taste the difference in every dish. Or Coastal in Manhattan Beach, where the fish really is caught daily by local boats and the menu changes based on what's available. These restaurants don't need to lie about their sourcing because their sourcing is genuinely impressive. 6 months ago, I reviewed a small Italian place in Glendale called Nana's Table. Family-owned, 3rd generation, making pasta by hand every morning. Nothing fancy, no trendy Instagram moments, just honest food prepared with care. The review was glowing. I called it a reminder that the best restaurants don't need marketing gimmicks, they just need heart. It went viral for all the right reasons. The family called to thank me, tears in their voices. Business doubled overnight. Food bloggers started making pilgrimages to try their handmade ravioli. Other critics wrote follow-up pieces about the importance of family-owned restaurants. That's the power of honest food writing. When we celebrate authenticity as enthusiastically as we condemn fraud, when we elevate genuine passion as much as we expose calculated deception, we help create a food culture that values truth over trends. But it requires courage. From critics, from restaurants, and from readers. Last month, I got an email from a restaurant owner in Portland. He'd read my luminous investigation and wanted advice about a situation in his own city. There's a place here claiming to source from farms that don't exist, he wrote. They're charging premium prices for Cisco ingredients. It's hurting all the restaurants that actually do local sourcing. Should I speak up? Should I contact a food critic? What would you do? I told him to document everything and contact the Portland Mercury's food writer. 2 weeks later, that restaurant was exposed in a thorough investigation. The owner was forced to remove false claims from his menu and refund customers who felt deceived. 3 local farms that actually supply restaurants saw increased business as a result. The truth spreads faster than lies, once it gets started. These days, when I walk into a restaurant, I'm not looking for failure. I'm looking for honesty. I want to taste passion, creativity, integrity. I want to write reviews that help readers find memorable meals and avoid disappointments. But I'm also looking for red flags, vague sourcing claims, prices that don't match ingredient quality, staff who can't answer basic questions about preparation methods, owners who seem more interested in Instagram buzz than customer satisfaction. When I find those red flags, I dig deeper. Because every fraudulent restaurant that gets exposed makes room for an authentic one to succeed. Every lie that gets challenged makes truth more valuable. Every critic who stands up to intimidation makes it safer for the next journalist to do their job. The viral restaurant review disaster taught me that food criticism isn't just about flavor and presentation and service quality. It's about accountability. It's about protecting consumers from deception. It's about creating a food culture that rewards honesty and punishes fraud. It's about being brave enough to tell the truth, even when powerful people want you to shut up. Richard Van Meer gets out of prison in 8 months. He's already filed paperwork to start a new restaurant consulting company, specializing in crisis management and reputation repair. Some people never learn. But Sofia Martinez just opened her second location. Danny Rodriguez is now head chef at a farm-to-table place in Culver City that actually sources from local farms. Marcus Murphy, well, he kept his promise. Last month, he opened a small breakfast place in Los Feliz called Honest Eats. No fancy marketing, no false claims, just good food at fair prices. I reviewed it 3 weeks ago. Anonymously, paying my own way, no special treatment. The review was positive. Not glowing, but positive. The food was simple, well-prepared, and reasonably priced. The staff was friendly and knowledgeable. The atmosphere was welcoming without trying too hard. It was honest, just like Marcus promised. At the end of the review, I wrote, "Honest Eats lives up to its name." In a city full of restaurants selling stories, it's refreshing to find one that just serves food. Marcus texted me after it went live. "Thank you for giving me a second chance." But he'd given himself the second chance.
I just documented it.
That's the thing about food criticism. We don't create success or failure. We just witness it, document it, and share what we experience. The restaurants that succeed do so because they serve good food to satisfied customers. The ones that fail do so because they don't. My job is just to tell you which is which. The luminous investigation will probably follow me for the rest of my career. Job interviews will include questions about handling pressure and standing up to intimidation. Speaking engagements will feature the story of the critic who fought back against fraud. I'm okay with that. Because every time I tell the story, another young journalist learns that truth matters more than popularity. Another restaurant owner understands that honesty is better than hype. Another reader realizes they have the power to demand authenticity from the places they choose to support. Change happens one story at a time, one review at a time, one honest conversation at a time. 3 months ago, I got a call from a producer at 60 Minutes. They wanted to do a segment about fraud in the restaurant industry, using the Luminous case as a starting point. "We'd like to interview you," she said, "but also explore the broader issues. How common is fake sourcing? How are critics dealing with intimidation? What can consumers do to protect themselves?" The segment aired last Sunday. 12 minutes of investigation into restaurant fraud, featuring interviews with farmers, suppliers, critics, and industry experts. They used my story as the opening hook, but the real focus was on systemic problems and potential solutions. The response has been overwhelming. Restaurant owners calling to pledge transparency about their sourcing. Farmers offering to work directly with journalists to verify supply chains. Food critics sharing their own experiences with pressure and intimidation. And readers. Readers are asking better questions. Where do you actually source your salmon? Can I see documentation of your local partnerships? What farm produced these tomatoes? The questions that should have been asked all along. Last week, I had dinner at a new place in West Hollywood. Farm fresh ingredients, locally sourced, sustainably produced. The usual claims. But when I asked our server about their suppliers, she lit up. "Oh, you should meet Carlos, our produce manager. He goes to the farmer's market every Wednesday and Thursday. He can tell you exactly which farm grew your carrots." And she brought Carlos over to our table. 5 minutes of passionate conversation about heirloom varieties and soil conditions and seasonal availability. Real knowledge from someone who actually cared about where food comes from. That's what authentic farm-to-table looks like. After dinner, I wrote a review celebrating their commitment to transparency and quality. It wasn't viral, didn't generate thousands of shares or trending hashtags. But it was honest. And in the end, that's all that matters. The viral restaurant review disaster changed my life in ways I'm still discovering. It made me a better journalist, a more careful critic, and a stronger advocate for truth in food writing. But mostly, it reminded me why I became a food critic in the first place. Not for the free meals or the insider access or the social media following. I became a critic because I love food, I love restaurants, and I love helping people find memorable dining experiences. The best way to do that is to tell the truth. Always. Even when it's difficult. Especially when it's difficult. So, here's my challenge to everyone who's listened to this story. Next time you see farm to table on a menu, ask questions. Next time a restaurant makes claims about local sourcing, request specifics. Next time you read a food review, consider whether the critic is being honest or just trying to avoid controversy. And if you're a restaurant owner, a food critic, or anyone else in this industry, choose truth over convenience. It's harder in the short term. It's more expensive, more complicated, more risky. But in the long term, authenticity always wins. Because readers can taste the difference between real and fake. They can sense when a critic is being honest versus when they're pulling punches. They can tell when a restaurant genuinely cares about quality versus when they're just trying to maximize profits. And once they taste the real thing, they never go back to the fake. That's the lesson of Luminous. That's the lesson of this whole viral disaster. That's the lesson I want to leave you with. Truth is worth fighting for. Even when the fight gets scary. Share your own stories in the comments below. Tell me about restaurants that surprised you, critics who influenced you, moments when you had to choose between comfort and honesty. And subscribe for more stories that matter. Because this won't be my last investigation. This won't be my last time challenging powerful people who think journalists should stay quiet and compliant. The next time someone tries to silence a critic for telling the truth, they'll find out what happened to Richard Van Meer. They'll discover that intimidation only works if you let it. That threats only succeed if you back down. That fraud only continues if nobody has the courage to expose it. I'm Emma Caldwell, and I'll never stop asking the hard questions. Even when they don't want to answer them. Especially then.